So maybe Bitcoin is kind of in like a super cycle adoption thing, but that doesn't mean that all coins are going to go with it. And I think training your mind and kind of reestablishing that this new reality, I think that's going to be the best way to survive moving forward.
Nothing said on 0x Research is a recommendation to buy or sell securities or tokens. This podcast is for informational purposes only, and any views expressed by anyone on the show are solely our opinions, not financial advice. Boccaccio, Ryan, and our guests may hold positions in the companies, funds, or projects discussed.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of 0x Research. Before we jump into the show today, I do want to do a quick shout out for DAS. The Digital Asset Summit is coming back to New York next month. A lot of exciting things are going to be happening. We are going to have some live podcasts, the 1000X guys, the Lightspeed guys. They'll be live at the event, and a bunch of exciting speakers and guests from around the industry. I kind of want to let's do a quick like around the room. Mark, I know that you're going to be there at DAS. Anything you want to highlight, or what are you going to be involved with when you're there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking forward to going. This is going to be my first crypto conference in the US. And it's in New York, the Big Apple. So looking forward to that. I'm moderating a panel on lending, and I have a couple other, maybe one other moderation. So hopefully I can squeeze in some time, because I know Kathy Wood's going to be there. I've never seen her live. I know Richard Tang is going to be there, CEO of Binance. I don't know for sure, but I think this might be the first time he's speaking in like a conference since he became CEO. So I hope I get to catch out those two conferences while I'm there, depending on how the workload goes. But yeah, excited.
Bach, Daniel Shapiro, any thoughts from you guys? Stuff that either speakers you think are exciting, or talks that you're interested to hear?
Yeah, I want to see a lot of stablecoin talk. I want to hear about Plasma and the new Tether chain, the new Tether L1. I want to see Mark speak. That's really it.
One speaker I'm excited to be there is Eric Peters of One River. He puts out a great weekly newsletter, and also just one of the earliest TradFi guys to the crypto trend. Kyle Samani will be there. Always love his contrarian insights. And then kind of on the more like RWA and crypto bridge stuff, Sergey Nazarov will be there. So yeah, really, really great, diverse range of speakers.
Awesome. Yeah, it's going to be jam-packed. A ton of people from either around the industry or, maybe interested in coming into the industry from like the TradFi side of things. So definitely check it out. And for all the listeners out there, use code 0x10, link in the description. You can get 10% off tickets if you're interested in heading off to DAS. Maybe you'll get to see Mark and some of the other research guys that'll be there. I know Ryan Cashflows Connor as well. I think he will be there.
It's not really our thing, Danny. They're not sending us over. It's not our thing. I wish they would send us over, but I feel like it'd be a little goofy if they sent the two consumer and gaming guys to DAS.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. It's a bit more institutionalized focused, right? So I don't know if the I mean you said it right. The gaming and the deep on-chain degen guys. I don't know if that's who they need at the at the conference, but maybe they'll shoe us in for the next one.
Yeah, I'll do one final very small show. I think you covered everything, but I will say one thing. I think a lot of I would say like our type of analyst, Danny, they think that this kind of conference isn't really worth going. Like they would rather go to permissionless, ETH Denver token 2049, etc. I think these institutional conferences are a pretty good place to kind of hear VCs talk to other VCs and like how funds think about the space going forward. So I think like if you are in New York or in the US or anywhere else and you're like, this isn't exactly my crowd, I think you should still kind of take a chance. Use code 0x10, take a chance, and just go to the conference, check it out. Because I think it's pretty clear that the institution is going to face some pretty significant shifts going forward, and it would kind of suck to. It doesn't have to be about DAS. Like any institutional conference, you should take a shot and go at it and just see what's happening.
100%. I think that's a great point for the sort of like on-chain crypto native folks out there. Like this is definitely an opportunity to either get perspectives, insights, like hear opinions from people that you otherwise maybe have zero exposure to or limited exposure to, right? And how they're thinking and how they're kind of, stepping into or thinking about stepping into, doing more crypto related things. So 100%, I think great point, great call out. Again, one more time, 0x10, that's the code, get 10% off tickets, and hopefully we'll see you there next month. But yeah, we can jump into the show. We ran around the room a little bit already, but joined again. We got Boccaccio back on the pod. We've got Daniel Shapiro and Mark. A full research crew today. Happy to see it. Love to see that. I think there's been a lot of craziness within the market, on the timelines. Wild things are happening. We're calling it crime season. We're calling it do whatever you want on the blockchain season. Don't actually do that. That's not advice. But that's how it appears to be based on what people are seeing on socials today. I think the big one as of late, we don't really have to dive into the details, but the Libra token, the sort of like Malay Argentina controversy, and the kind of Kelsier Ventures fallout. That's, you see a lot of people who are a bit jaded and maybe connections to just, some silliness that people were doing on chain and around these tokens. But maybe some bigger news that's like kind of getting ignored or missed out on is there were a lot of filings just recently around either new holdings or added holdings around BTC ETFs, for example. The state of Wisconsin announced that they're holding over 300 million. The Abu Dhabi Sovereign Wealth Fund bought over 400 million of BTC ETFs in Q1. We're seeing like some early discussion of, like Citibank and other like TradFi institutions talking about sort of signaling their desire to want to launch like Bitcoin and crypto custody. Obviously, that's going to depend on regulations, but a lot of these things I think are they're getting ignored, and people are highlighting on the negative things. How are we feeling generally, guys, right now? Like, is it as bad as everyone says, or are we doomed?
I think Mark can probably give a bit more color on the institutional side of things. I'm gonna kind of talk a bit about sentiment. I think this is just I don't think it's peak worst sentiment, but I think what's happened over the past 2 months, and I'm putting prior to Trump coin and then also like Trump coin, etc., has been pretty drastic. I think there's clearly a sentiment shift on Twitter. From what I understand, now the way to approach this, I think, is like kind of twofold. I'm gonna mainly be speaking about Solana. The value is still, I think, okay. Not like the token's value, but I think like the value prop of Solana, which is cheap, scalable L1. On the other hand, I think Trump was clearly, like, now in hindsight, we can all say, yeah, that was probably like peak sentiment for Solana for some time. On that end, I do think that the value prop is still there. If you look at it today, like, I know people get upset by this sometimes, the term REV, but what it is really is like fees and priority fees and how much people are willing to use the chain. It's still 40% of like the L1s that we track at Blockworks, which I would say are the most relevant ones. So it still makes up 40% of that. So I think, and this is something that Ryan kind of brought to my attention, is this idea of what you see on Twitter isn't necessarily the reality. Like, I'm sure that funds are still looking at Solana and saying, wow, this is, 40% of the market share for fees. Like, people are still paying good money to use Solana and it's making money. Even though it's down, dude, I think it's down 93% from the Trump top with REV, which is kind of crazy. But still, it's 40%. So everything else has also gone down in terms of fees. I do think we got a bit too silly on that end. And by silly, I mean like very, very serious crimes. So I think there's going to be some backlash over this. I also think both can be kind of true. Like, Solana still has the value prop, but on the other hand, if you hit somebody 15 times when every time they walk through a door, the 16th time they might just not walk through. Like, people respond to feedback loops, and if all you are getting on Solana is like mass extraction events and you're losing a lot of money. And I know people like to say like, oh, some people are making a lot of money. Some are, but a lot of people are losing a lot of money. I think eventually that attention might shift elsewhere, and I think it's kind of lining up with some other chains. I don't know if we're going to talk about HyperEVM today. I'm not going to talk about it too much now, but like HyperEVM, Monad, Mega ETH, Base is still a great alternative. We might see some of those get some market share, but I mean, Solana's still kind of the dominant play. We'll have to see how that looks. Like I think fees are kind of a lagging indicator at that end, but it can also help you understand like how the activity is shifting. So I think it's probably just good to keep track of, like, ignoring Twitter sentiment and everybody saying Solana's dead now. I think it's probably best to just keep a track of how activity is evolving on Solana, because at the end of the day, they did end up building out pretty good ecosystem. Like Camino's fantastic, MarginFi, Jupiter, even though they've had some issues lately, I guess with the crime side. Jito's incredible. So they have the base for it, and I think it's semi-Lindy now. They got the wallet, everybody to download the wallet. They have very strong distribution. Everybody knows how to use Solana. Everybody knows what to do on Solana. So like I guess the main takeaway is I would just like keep track of what's happening. I could see a sentiment shift happen towards like another new L1s and L2s gain market share from Solana, but I also don't know if it's right to say Solana's completely dead. It's probably like a in between of the two. Maybe Solana never does as well as it has done in the past because it was dominating for a very long time, but I also think it's probably best to just keep a track on it because they still have the tools to do okay. Reasonable response. I know you were worried I was going to come on here and crash out.
Yeah, I'm just going to echo that. I mean, you summed it up pretty nicely there. I think we did reach some kind of peak euphoria with Trump, and maybe it was obvious in hindsight. When the institutions are coming, and by that I mean government institutions as well. We didn't think they were going to come to rug us, right? So that wasn't necessarily on the cards. But more on the ETF side, the background things that are possibly happening, like Ethereum this month. What are we? The 18th. It's had $400 million in net flows month to date. That's just February alone. And the 13F filings came out, and we see things like Bitcoin, Tudor Investment, which is Paul Tudor Jones, $1 billion hedge fund. Like, their 13F filings show that Bitcoin was their largest stock/ETF position in the entire portfolio of 3,000 names. So one of the largest hedge funds in the world, they're one of their largest position is Bitcoin through these IBIT ETFs, right? So I think, and I also think this is why there's been a lot of dispersion happening too, because the ETFs have kind of changed Bitcoin's market dynamics, just in terms of steady passive flows every month, eating up the mining seller pressure, and as well as just more institutions buying it. Like, if you just do surveys, you see more institutions are admitting that they have more in their portfolio. Even if you use 13F filings as a benchmark, it's gone up quarter over quarter over quarter since the Bitcoin ETFs launched last year, January. So I think these things are happening in the back end, and maybe they become more normalized. So we're not talking about them as much, but that's kind of a good thing. The fact that they're being normalized. And I just expect to see more of these consistent flows to follow.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember your original question here, but just to kind of tail on, give general thoughts. I think we're in a completely new market now. I think we're going to continue seeing dispersion, right? Like, clearly there's, like, Bitcoin as a product, it's selling itself as digital gold, and there's buyers for that, right? And with the ETF, there is a mechanism for large amounts of capitals to purchase that product. All these L1s, like Solana was selling this Memecoin game, and that drives the vast majority of its REV. And I think the only other sizable portion of its REV comes from Sol USD trading, but you could intuit that a lot of people are buying Sol to then go. buy meme coins. So, I think that product, that game, like it's a net negative EV game, and I think the average person loses money when they do that. And the whole Libra thing showed that, like, yeah, like this, it's just all insiders are pretty much the only ones that can consistently make money doing that. And like what Box said, like, yeah, how many more times are people going to walk back into the casino? So that was probably a local peak there. So at this point, pending some event which either triggers an increase in liquidity and lowering of interest rates. I don't know if that's down before up, or I don't know if it just comes because, I don't know, maybe China fires off the liquidity bazooka first. Like I'm not a macro expert here. No one can predict these things. Pending that coming, I think it's going to be continued dispersion. I mean, already, like, Bitcoin's holding up, alts are down a lot from kind of the December, January highs. And I think at this point, looking forward, and I know we're going to talk a little bit about this more in the later stages of this pod, but it's going to come down to, I think, fundamentals from here. And we'll see. Maybe the cycle's still on and we're kind of rolling through the top right now, but I don't know. I kind of have a feeling that, Bitcoin is starting to get these new flows and it's going to keep going. So maybe Bitcoin is kind of in like a super cycle adoption thing, but that doesn't mean that all coins are going to go with it. And I think training your mind and kind of reestablishing this new reality, I think that's going to be the best way to survive moving forward.
This episode is brought to you by Ledger, the global leader in digital asset security. Celebrating 10 years of innovation, Ledger remains the most secure hardware wallet for your crypto and logins, trusted by 7 million users and securing 20% of the world's digital assets. Follow the link in today's show notes to grab your Ledger now. I think good points all around. Let's circle all the way back around to Box takes on some of the Solana REV stuff. I think it's good to highlight. We got the data up here. We've basically, like, in the beginning of February, have trended back to the levels prior to the Trump token launch. And, like, yeah, looking back now, you see that massive spike. Maybe that what should have been some kind of indication, but obviously that's always hindsight is 2020 in all of these scenarios. But then if we look even more recently, like, maybe we are trending down to even the pre-election levels of activity, which are still incredibly meaningful. Like, if we zoom out on the weekly basis, like, this is still massively more meaningful in terms of value to the network than we saw a year and a half ago. So if we need to, if people decide that they don't want to trade as many, insider commemorative coins, and we go back to prior levels, it's not the end of the world for Sol, like you said. And I think just highlighting the other point here as well around the sort of L1 comparison or the chain comparison. Sol is still incredibly dominant here. I mean, just the recent day, we're looking at maybe 38% of total network REV across kind of the stack of things. But again, if we zoom out, the trend has been very, very strong for the past, nearly 2 years at this point. I think we'll need to see some other other meaningful catalysts to massively change this. And the one point there that I think you had is either if it's additional chains come on board and they can, effectively, figure out some distribution to get users on, and maybe that convinces people to move over. That might be one option. And then maybe we line this right into the topic around fundamentals. I think you're totally right, Daniel. There's been a lot of talk about this as well, which is funny. But what's important to highlight, I think you talked both sides of this, for example, in your points that you made. But there's been a lot of talk of fundamentals. Some things getting brought up, like Solana dexes, for example. Yet a lot of the dexes and trading applications depend on, these spikes and high levels of trading activity around memes today, to sustain their current valuations or where they're priced looking forward. If you think that activity is going to trail off in the coming 6-12 months, then that changes your outlook. I guess, do we have strong thoughts on fundamentals today? Are there like things we need to be thinking about or looking at going into the next, year ahead, that people aren't really thinking about? It seems like right now it's very much like, oh, memes were crazy and like now they're dying, and therefore like everyone's going to buy fundamental things. But it feels like a bit of a naive take. Like, does anyone have a deeper insight there they want to share?
I do think that that's a bit of a naive take. I know, like, a lot of people, actually, this was kind of funny. At the start of the cycle, a lot of people were like, we're going to do apps. Like, we're going to be betting apps. And then I think if you look, you'll see that L1s probably did the best risk adjusted returns. There's a few apps that did really, really well. Radium, as Mark knows, because he wrote that piece way, way early. Camino, across did well. I'm just like, there's a bunch of apps that did well, but still, people, I guess, generally were like, the L1 premium is done. And then we kind of saw that not be true. I would expect that to continue. I don't think that memes die. I do think that we do tend to overcorrect quite a bit. Like, I know a lot of people view this meme cycle as some form of financial nihilism um, thing, and then a bunch of other people are like, "Oh, it's just like gambling, and we're going back to our roots." I like to view it as kind of an overcorrection on what we were facing, and I think this whole idea of like crime is legal is actually what it was. Like, we did overcorrect from a very oppressive regulatory regime towards something that's, I think, too loose. But there were like, I guess, like, meme coins have always kind of been extractive, but there's kind of a method to the madness. And I wonder if, like, if we do go back to memes, which is very likely, like you said, I think saying fundamentals matter is kind of naive in an industry where fundamentals have historically not mattered a lot, and I don't see that changing. Apps will definitely be interesting. L1 premium, I think, continues, and people will probably still build L1s. I do see meme coins coming back. Probably not our memes, in the sense that, like, the ones that we already hold. I kind of like the, like, wholesome memes. Like, you can show your girlfriend bonk and she'll be like, yeah, this is funny. It's like a dog getting it in the head. And I know, like, these also have like big operations behind them. Same as WIF, same as Pepe. But it's better than, like it's harder to explain, I think, Melee, which is a lot more of an extractive operation. What I'm basically trying to say is, like, if we do go back to memes, I am assuming that we'll do more like wholesome memes. I know people like to blame pump fun. I think we might see kind of a decrease in that, although I'm not betting on that. But that's like, I think we still see it, and I think probably the best bet to do here is bid stuff that is kind of fundamental but also has meme coin exposure. And I think the big one has been Radium. I'm sure there's a bunch of other, like if you just go down maybe like DeFi Llama for 15 minutes, you can figure out like what might benefit and then work for that. That's it. That's my, like, that's what I see happening.
Once again, I'm gonna 100% agree with Bok. I do think meme coins come back. I mean, look at the casino industry. Look at the online casino industry. No matter how many times you lose money, it's a growing industry globally, no matter where. And yes, with the US legalization of online gambling, they're experiencing that firsthand themselves. I do think, in terms of the mean reversion too that Bok mentioned, like, if you just took the entire crypto market cap, you got rid of Bitcoin, you got rid of stable coins, and maybe even ETH if you wanted. Like, since post-election, since Trump won, it was up like 3x, right? In a few months. And everybody was like, this is a new norm. And so I think it's kind of normal for something that's up, like a lot of coins up 300% in a few months. I think it's very normal for them to retrace 50% or more. I think the sentiments right now, even on Bitcoin has a 0% funding rate on many of the major per platforms, right? So I think sentiments might be very low. Even if you look at RSI indicators across many of the majors, they're all very low. But even though sentiment is low and there's this retracement and mean reversion, things with fundamentals have actually outperformed. Like, things with cash flows have not seen as much downside volatility as the things that people maybe don't have as much conviction holding, or people always knew this was a musical chair, or for whatever reason that fundamentals matter. They seem to have mattered a lot more this past downturn, and I think that's why they're getting a lot more attention now while we're talking about it. And probably the only people still optimistic on the timeline are those looking at fundamentals anyway. So maybe that's a little bit of bias, but yeah, I think that kind of like zoom out a little bit, and you could get a little bit of a more holistic picture of where we are.
Yeah, agreed. I'm gonna completely agree with you, Mark. I'm gonna say two things. Number one is I think we, as Blockworks, were, I would say, like relatively early to the Solana trend, and we've been very, very bullish, and a lot of that has come from activity on it. So I want to say like two things. Number one is that I think we get a lot of criticism regarding like REV and meme coins. So first of all, REV is just fees plus priority fees, and some of that is from MEV. And the second thing is that I don't think anyone on the team is bullish this crime cycle. And I saw a few of these tweets, so I feel like we don't really explain ourselves very, very well on the pod. And this is our like very big public appearance. So I just want to like clarify, because I just said I don't think memes are gonna die. Mark, you also said like the casino never stops. And I think like there's a difference between saying something is good for Radium and for Solana, because that's just the reality of the world. And then there's a difference between like moral, which I'm not even going to get into. Like, I don't want to ask Mark about the morality of gambling and meme coins because I don't care. Like, he gives objective ideas on how it affects Radium and Solana, and that's all that matters. So I just want to clarify that. And in terms of memes, I also don't think memes die. But I could see it slow down significantly, and I wouldn't be surprised. I could also see it just continue the way that it is, but like I think my heart kind of wants it to slow down a bit and like relax a bit because it's a bit much. But we'll see. The first bit is more important. The second bit is not as important. That's just my opinion.
Ledger is the global leader in digital asset security, trusted by 7 million users and securing 20% of the world's digital assets. In recent years, Ledger has built a comprehensive ecosystem of products and services, making digital ownership more secure and accessible for everyone. Ledger's newest devices, Ledger Stacks and Ledger Flex, introduce the world's first secure touchscreens, making it easier and safer to manage your transactions and assets. Alongside Ledger Stacks and Ledger Flex, they have also launched the Ledger Security Key app, offering a safer alternative to traditional passwords and enhancing your digital security. Follow the link into today's show notes to get started with Ledger today. Yeah, maybe I'll just add some thoughts generally is like when we think of similar examples of this type of activity, like, people buying lottery tickets on the weekly or sports betting, like the rules and like the general game as it's played is generally the same for those things, like day in, day out. Like, the Mega Millions lottery in the US, for example, it's always the same, right? Like you can buy a ticket or 10 tickets or whatever, and you have like a 1 in 300 million chance or whatever, like some insane low number, but then the prize is a massive amount. And so like that never really gets shaken up. The only thing that really changes is like, is the prize pool higher or lower this time? And then therefore, like, do I want to buy more or less tickets if I'm someone who wants to like, gamble on this opportunity? The big thing with the memes, like, and I think you highlighted this, is just like, it's decentralized. Anybody can make them. Like the platforms make that pretty easy. And so like when you have this, opportunity for like teams and insiders and like large individuals with massive followings or like influence in the real world, to like use their image to like promote these things, the whatever the game is constantly changing. So it's not like, it would be hard to expect like, even if you thought that meme coin trading and this trend is going to continue like up into the future, it wouldn't be unsurprising to see that like ebb and flow as the game kind of evolves, because it's not always like the exact same system or game that people are playing. When you have an event like this Libra coin, like I think people kind of like, they have to digest that a little bit. Maybe they didn't like that and they want to like wait for the next game, or if the behavior changes, like, a bit of it is just social sentiment. It's like social consensus around like, we didn't like that type of game. Like, let's design a new game and we'll play that one later. But for now, we're gonna chill out for a bit. And I think that's what we're seeing. And it's essentially, I think, what we saw from like on a cycle to cycle basis. Like, there were a lot of like Ponzonomic tokens and protocol designs that weren't necessarily building like super real things. Like if you look at a lot of like ohm forks and 3.3 designs and lots of things with like buy and sell token taxes that were essentially just like raw Ponzi schemes on chain. That was just kind of like a game at the time that was happening, and eventually people got upset and tried to play a different one. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing now.
Yeah. I will also add on to this. I hope Ryan Connor doesn't listen to this pod, and you as well. I guess you have to listen. You're hearing me now, but we had the ohm forks, etc., whatever Ponzonomics we had, and then we kind of shifted into more reasonable. Like we did get eventually people saying, "Okay, let's take a step back and build out other stuff." I know that the meme coin trend, especially with celebrities, is horrible, mass extractive. But I do think that it could lead to some new form. Like we've tried out SocialFi quite a bit. I'm still not convinced why we need it, but there's clearly interest in it from VCs and from regular people who are like somewhat interested in betting on influencers, betting on creators, and giving them money for some reason. We might get a revival of that, which I feel like would be a natural shift away from celebrity coins, and we could look back in like a year and a half, 2 years, and say, "Oh, you know what? It actually did match up." So that's my positive take on $300 million lost over one weekend.
I'm actually cautiously optimistic on the future, the next cycle of meme coins, if and when that happens, and primarily because of Uniswap v4. There's this launchpad called Flaunch, Fair Launch, haha, you get it. And the way it works is that they're building off of these Uniswap v4 hooks, but you can, you launch a coin, the first 30 minutes is the same price for everybody. There's a sliding scale where you can allocate between 0 and 100% of the fees to either the creator of the coin or for buybacks of the coin itself. Like the fees from the trading volume on the launchpad are used to buy back the same meme coin that was launched. It has some MEV protection and some minor stuff like that, but this is just one example of a type of meme DEX, meme launchpad that can be used to create a more fair system and, minimize the downside risk for these, other retail participants who are coming into this meme game. And, if you're looking at daily buybacks, programmatic daily buybacks from the launchpad, like, maybe that's some fundamentals in the meme coin there. Kind of reflexive, but don't necessarily say that. But this might not be the optimal design, but if the fact is that this was like V1, it might be it might be the go-to design because it's it might have Lindy by then. But there's going to be more iterations of this, and I think that participants just like Pump.Fund made them secure through their bonding curve and through the graduation to Radium. I think other market dynamics like mechanics within a launchpad can help retail feel just as safe, if not safer, on another kind of platform built off of these hooks or maybe another DEX.
Yeah, I think something like that is what would be required for like celebrity coins to take off, or right, like some type of coin that is theoretically like tracking, right, whether it's some figure, some entity, some group, a music artist, athlete, whatever. Those would assuredly have to launch with some type of fair launch dynamics, right? And then I think you could do some pretty cool things. Um, to answer the initial question about the fundamental stuff, like, yeah, I agree with everyone's takes here. Like speculation is going to persist, right? If it's in the form of meme coins as it was last cycle, I'm not sure. Um, do I think Solana has a good chance of kind of being the hub for on-chain speculation, experiments, kind of cutting edge, kind of new things, whether it's DeFi, these type of fair launch pads, stuff like that. I think Solana has a pretty good chance. I do think that on the institutional side of things, my bias has always been I do think that, right, like whoever, I think the power of a chain and the dominance of chain comes from right? Like what can you sell, right? Solana sold all the assets that people wanted to buy this cycle, and so it went up the most and it captured the most REV. Like I think that asset managers are going to try to create their own chains to sell their own assets to benefit, um, to capture all those fees themselves, right? And then likely um, connect with each other with some interop solution or whatever. But in terms of the on-chain side of things, like I think Solana has proven um, that it's likely the leader there for this kind of frontier level on-chain innovation. So I do think it's going to come back. Um, Solana has a full-fledged DeFi ecosystem. Like it's caught up to Ethereum, and it's significantly further ahead than all the other high frequency, um, or high throughput chains, right? So I do think there'll need to be some time for it to cool down here. I know that's Danny's favorite expression, but it's going to come back. I think what I'm excited about though in the short term, and this was a take I had on this podcast maybe like a month or two ago, like when the whole Trump coin launched and everything. Like my take was I actually thought that this was more interesting for like fundamental and like TradFi adjacent like RWA stuff than it was for like meme coins and speculative things, because in a weird way, like making all that legal, like now like the real stuff is legal. Like the people with trillions and tens of trillions of dollars that trade quadrillion-dollar derivatives markets and stuff, like those guys can now start tokenizing things and start getting into crypto. And like there's so many efficiency gains that will be made, and there's so much incentive for them to tokenize and to move on chain. Whether that's at first like more of like a closed sandbox environment or like public on chain. Like I think that's coming now. There's going to be a lag. It's not Trump's priority, but I think the next ensuing months, quarters, whatever it is, I think it's figuring out like what's that trade look like.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree in the sense that Solana definitely has some, fundamental like institutions behind it. Frankel Templeton is onboarding real assets. I also think that Ethereum is doing the same. And I might be cheating when I say Ethereum. When I mean Ethereum and potentially some of the L2s. Yeah, there's this great chart that I saw on Twitter showing of all the non-crypto companies that's building up on Ethereum and the L2s. And in my opinion, this might be a little bit over exaggerated. Like is Google building on chain is more like, okay, maybe you can like get on chain data or something. But like I think this is, kind of what you're saying, like the institutions are coming here, whether it's sandboxes or pilot programs. This stuff exists now or existed in the past. And now that this is essentially more of a, let's just call it a green light from the current administration in the US, which also kind of sets the stage for the rest of the world as well. I think that this chart is probably going to expand probably by tenfold across all chains in the next year. And I say the next year because, for these institutions, that's how long some of this stuff is going to take. Just to even get the understanding around it, the cost, the benefit analysis, like it's going to take some time. And, and just like how there was a ramp up from even on the investor side of things, like to purchase Bitcoin ETFs, Ethereum ETFs and whatnot, I think it's going to take some time on like the product market side of things as well, from CMOs and CPOs to actually begin to open up integrating these products into their suite. And the lowest hanging fruit from this is obviously financial institutions, and that's why probably here we're seeing majority of it being like the Visas and the Santanders and the BlackRocks. But there's Sonium has their own L2. There's Shopify for payments. There's other ones that I don't think are going to work. Maybe things like, I don't know what are, like Nike's shoes. I tried to sign up for those. I looked at that. I wasn't really a fan. It was like lame NFTs. But the bigger point is that they're trying more on-chain stuff. They're trying to reach out to a different market and trying to expand their existing line. So yeah, definitely agree with your take.
Yeah, I think there's a good point here as well in that, like, if we link it back to some of the discussion around, like even Bach mentioned, pump fun. We're seeing even like Elon, the one of the pump fund creators, talking about like, they need to maybe look at implementing more guardrails around the application. Like, do they need to filter out tokens on the front end interface because they are like seemingly scams based on the trading activity or the initial bundle transactions, right? If somebody bundles 99% of the supply, like, do you really want to put that on your front end and sell it and like let people buy it? And I think like when we think about larger institutions and companies like doing things on chain, if they're aware of some of these things happening, right? Like they see Trump token, they see Libra token, like I think it's obvious that they're going to want to be careful about how they approach this space. You wouldn't expect that like Nike or Adidas would want to like launch some token with 90% bundled supply and like ruin their brand image potentially to their audience or their community, because then they look like on-chain scammers or something. So I think it's natural to expect that like based on just the social sentiment, the consensus around like what we think is like okay or not okay in terms of like how to approach tokens and like how we sell some of these things to consumers, that will shift. And if these brands or like larger institutions are coming, they're going to be very careful and methodical about how they do that.
This isn't related to the brand talk, but I want to bring something up. In terms of censorship, and this is a conversation that got brought up quite a bit, is people are expecting Tolly to do something. People are expecting Raj to do something. People are even expecting Matt to do something, and he's clearly not even like on the Solana side. They can't, obviously. It's censorship. It's trustless, permissionless. I think Pump Fund side should probably go with a strict, non-strict type of play where they kind of look at some form of bubble maps, but those probably won't even work because people are very sophisticated now. I think honestly one of the things that I love about crypto is we kind of self-regulate, or at least we start self-regulating when everyone's like been hurt, and then we're like, you know what, guys, this we should fix this up a bit. I think that's probably what will end up happening. Like we'll just end up self-regulating. I don't think you can expect anything from Pump Fund, because at the end of the day, Pump Fund is like, okay, it's majority used for meme coins, but what it really is it's like it allows you to fair launch a token. That's it. Now, is it being sniped? Yes. Are there like sophisticated actors at play? Yes, but that's not something that the Pump Fund team or the Solana team can control. What needs to be done is on the buyer side, they need to self-regulate. Like we need to self-regulate and say, I'm just not gonna, like, instead of buying 100 tokens, I'm just gonna buy one token that I know is good, and that's it. Like instead of betting on random stuff, and probably get a bit more sophisticated. Because if you stop, then it's not worth it for sophisticated actors anymore. I think that's something that we forget a lot, is like they are interested in money, and if you stop giving them money inadvertently, which I think will happen if you get burned too much, then the scams slow down a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think you make a good point. I mean, just tying back to some of Elon's thoughts on this topic as well, like there are aspects of that they can tune into, right? Like if it's surfacing more data to the front end, there's you can go look up the tools, right? Like this token had 95% bundled supply in the first transaction, whatever. If you're a more sophisticated user, you can like go and dig and find that information. But the thing that made Pump Fund a meaningful app, kind of in the last year and a half, is that they like simplified the user experience, right? Before you had to be really more advanced to create a contract, launch a token, and do all of those things, and they made that really easy. And so now we're realizing that the harder parts are like bundles, snipers, insiders, etc. So if there are additional information that can be surfaced to the users of these like front ends, these interfaces, or like additional educational tools, that give insight into whether like X type of tokens versus Y type of tokens are potentially more or less risky, whatever it may be. I think that just plays into the like self-policing aspect of, if you don't know anything, like if you don't have any of the data, it's like you can't really make a decision other than just like how you feel. But if you have the data and how you feel, then that makes it even easier for the users to be like, well, I'm not going to buy these tokens when the team buys 95% of the supply and dumps it on my head a day later, because that is just minus EV every time. So I just think the natural expectation is we'll see these platforms evolve. They'll implement more tools. They'll make them more meaningful for users. The experience will be a little bit better. You'll be able to, if it means censoring out some tokens, maybe they will. We've seen Dex Screener do that with certain types of things based on like kind of social backlash in the past, and people were generally like okay with that. And maybe maybe these trading apps will do the same thing. Like, we'll see. Have you been getting silly on chain this year, farming on 10 plus wallets across different ecosystems? Well, CryptoTax Calculator is here to help. CryptoTax Calculator has 3,000 plus integrations to support all of your wallets, exchange accounts, and on-chain activity, and a custom pricing oracle to handle even the most chaotic portfolios. Get started today and make tax season easy. You can use our exclusive discount code BW2025 to enjoy 30% off all paid CTC plans until April 15th of this year. Follow the link in the show notes below to get started. Maybe one other point to get into is people talk about... Actually, no, you know what, Bach? Since you mentioned it, let's talk about it. HyperEVM. We also had Monad Testnet was confirmed for the 19th, which is going to be technically yesterday when this pod comes out. Mega ETH, they did their initial NFT thing. We're kind of like seeing some projects that are building there. The Mega Mafia things are going on. I think there's things to be excited about, and I think it lends back to the question of like, is the activity going to continue to remain on Solana? They're like best positioned to like keep capturing like this on-chain trading speculative activity, but I think we are seeing potentially some contenders who could step in. Like Hyperliquid has captured the perps market. Can the HyperEVM like get some apps, some trading apps, and some meme apps, etc., onboarded and get users in there and like compete with Solana on the same front? There's a potential for that. What are your thoughts? Or I guess, are there any early apps or teams that we're seeing that?
I'll talk a bit about, I'll do some Hyperliquid talk. But like actually, I guess like broader thoughts is kind of already mentioned this. I think your job, or like our job, I guess, over the next however many months, mid to long term, short to midterm to long term, on all time frames, is to basically assess. Like, there are clearly 4 new chains that are going to launch that will garner some form of attention. HyperEVM already launched. There's Monad, Mega ETH. I'm missing one. Anyway, let's do 3 chains that have launched and are launching relatively soon. And we had Berachain and Abstract launch. On top of that, you have Base, which is an existing L2. You have Ethereum mainnet, which we're deciding on if we're going to scale it or not. You also have other L2s. So like, there's this entire pie, and on top of that, there's the old guard: Avalanche, Phantom, now Sonic, and BNB. So your like whole role as an analyst, our role as an analyst, is to say, is Solana going to? Because the majority of the pie is with Solana. Everybody else is fighting for. Like, at some point they were fighting over 30%. Now they're fighting over 60%. You have to decide if Solana's popularity is going to go down, and if it's going to go down to 20%, it'll still be like one of the majority ones, but will it go down? Or if they're going to fight amongst each other. Now, there's going to be a lot, I think, happening over the next few months. I think to start it off, I would imagine that the majority of the chains don't do very well in the first few months. Like, that's, I think, been pretty clear, is chains need time to get running. Like, we've optimized it as much as we can. We've decided on launching protocols day one, 50 to 60 of them at some point. At the end of the day, users don't go day one. They need opportunities. They need to have like, oh, did you see token X pumped on chain Y? I need to bridge over there. Like, that's how majority of people go. So I think like we'll have to wait a few months, so then it'll be clear afterwards if what ends up happening is Solana loses market share, or if they just fight amongst each other. Now, on the other hand, I guess like talking more specifically, I've looked at Monad ecosystem, Hyperliquid ecosystem, and Mega ETH. I would say like relatively in depth now, just like for my own personal reasons. I think Hyperliquid doesn't need much. Like, that's my honest take. I think Hyperliquid really needs a money market, liquid staking, maybe some trading front ends. That's it. I think because the core product is already good, and I think that is competing against. And this is like why I tend to be more bullish Hyperliquid than other people. I think people who look at Hyperliquid are like, this is an L1. It is competing with Solana. It is competing with Ethereum. It is competing with L2s. To me, it makes more sense. Hyperliquid is a perpstex L1. The L1 will be a sidecar, but what it's really competing against is sexes. Like I think it's competing against sexes and perpstexes. That's why I view the TAM as. That's why I view the competition as. So I think for the HyperEVM to be successful, it really just needs to like play into the Hyperliquid club, which means money markets, you get collateral bridging, liquid staking so that you can borrow on your liquid stake type. That's really it. That's all I can think of. Monad and Mega ETH, more difficult because those are going to actively compete against other L2s and other L1s, and they need NFTs, they need gaming, they need also on top of that perps taxes, they need AMMs, they need lending and money markets. Like they need everything that Hyperliquid needs and everything that Solana already has, but like built from the ground up. So those I imagine are going to take some time. I also imagine that the HyperEVM is going to take some time to evolve and grow and build up. So I don't think that there's really any competition with Solana apart from Base in the very, very short term. Maybe Barachain over the next few months, but I think that's on the same timeline as everything else. On that end, a few things that I've seen that are interesting is I'm going to actually interview these guys on 0x Research. We were supposed to do it last week, but we didn't. Mega ETH is GTE, which is a club, an AMM, and pump.fun style launchpad combined all into one. That's on Mega ETH. Valhalla Perps, which is by this guy named Pablo, who used to be at Free Sigma. They're building out a perps platform on Mega ETH. I think that's cool. For Mega ETH, I think you can just go through the Mega Mafia and make your own decisions. Like anything there is cool. Noise is another one where like you get to bet on sentiment. So I could have gone short. Well, I guess I could have gone short Solana sentiment, but also long Solana's mind share if I wanted to. Over the past few days, like if I thought that Solana sentiments were going to go to shit. We're seeing a lot of those. I think like Kaito is also kind of in that vein. I think that kind of stuff is actually quite interesting. It is kind of like CT focused, but we'll see how it works out. I think it's at least interesting. On the Monad end, you would know better, Danny. I'm probably going to try and avoid the clubs, to be honest with you. I'll see if they have any cool gaming NFTs, consumer style stuff. I know like we chatted with one of the ecosystem guys a while back, like 4 or 5 months ago.
Yeah. I'll highlight one interesting thing, like this trend, now that you mentioned some of the stuff on Mega ETH, is that, and I think it lends itself to what these chains are trying to build, right? They're trying to build these like hyper high throughput scaled EVM chains. But this like idea of like collabs on chain with like a backstop AMM, or like, and additionally having an AMM either on the side or additive to that. I'm seeing several teams exploring that on Monet as well. So I think it's interesting that you bring that up for, like the Mega ETH side of things. I think, it's just, it plays into this like kind of, I think, thesis or idea that we've had as well around like multi-product DeFi, where I think, teams are realizing that like, building like a great experience, but then like incorporating other products, or like if it's incorporating multiple products to make like that individual experience better for the user. Fundamentally, it's like where we're seeing a lot of teams move. Like you see this especially on the Solana side, as like Jupe has scaled out, as like Camino has added more and more things. This has just become like a more prominent trend. And so I think it's interesting to see, like I know Drake Exchange is one that just popping out of my mind on for Monad. I guess we'll see Testnet is going to drop tomorrow for us. So we'll see like who has something like available live for Testnet, if anything. But yeah, I'm seeing more like a combination of like, yeah, we're a perps dex, we're, some kind of like order book on chain. We also have an AMM, we also have a token launch pad. Like teams are going after this fairly
Yeah.
early on, which is interesting. It's like a trend. I feel like, and on the like trend trading side, not to be like too pony about it, but narrative is one that's on mono. I'd say that's probably like the equivalent of noise for Mega ETH, where it's like building a platform around trends and like basically going long or short those, you know, basically types of the narratives and or trends that are like kind of percolating, which is, it's like could be a potential like next step or like morph of the meme coin trading game, where, you know, people just love the speculation. They want to get upside on like the things that are happening. And if, you know, if the new interesting way to do that is to be like, you know, I'm bullish AI, I'm just going to like go along the AI trend. You know, that could be a fun way to go about it. But we'll see. We'll see if that gets traction over like individual token trading. I think it's unclear, but it's at least interesting.
Well, yeah. One thing I will say is I think, not tied into what you just said, Danny. I'm sorry, that's gonna be rude. But what I want to say is, I think if sentiment continues to get worse, we're going to get a lot of this. Kobe tweeted about this, and it's like at this point, some of these projects are down so bad, and people are just keep shitting on VC tokens. I think if sentiment continues to get worse, what might end up happening is you see like pretty deep discounts on things, specifically these like new L1s and L2s, just because I think a lot of people expect these L1s and L2s to go to get out day one blazing, and that's just not something that happens. Like, it doesn't make sense logically for a chain to have all of its end users, all of its like end apps day one. It wasn't the case with Solana. It took Solana a cycle to do it. It hasn't been the case with Sui and Aptos yet, and it won't be the case with these these new chains as well. So I think if sentiment continues to get bad, and we constantly have this parroted narrative of like VC coins bad, meme coins good, I think there are some things that have shown that this is good, Hyperliquid, but I think a lot of these things are getting into like existing projects are getting into deep discount territory where like they're lower than their latest raises. I'm sure there'll be an argument there's an argument that can be made that like they're still overvalued, and I'm not going to argue like for all projects that that's not true. But if sentiment keeps getting worse, there will be like very good opportunities for these new chains as people continue to shit on them and try to sound smart by saying, oh, like, why did we need a new chain? Like, the L1 trade wasn't dead last year. I bet it won't be dead next year or the year after that. Like, I think people always like to be early, and I think at some point we might see these trade down quite a bit to the point that people who expected it to like do well day one might be sidelined. That's my general thought on this.
Are you sidelined? Yeah, I mean, I have to agree with you there. I think like this space, so many times, like the best opportunities are presented in the periods when like the sentiment is like it's so over territory, like, you know, we're doomed, this industry actually is screwed, like we're never going to see real adoption. Like, I don't know, people I think people always love to say like retail is never coming back, like whatever you want your phrase to be, but it's like, I think, you know, I don't know if that's the prices today or if that's, you know, in 6 months or what have you. Like, you know, maybe we need as Shapiro said before he rolled off, is maybe we need to cool off a little bit. But like fundamentally, I think I agree with you that just like this, these are the types of periods where like if you have sustained like negative sentiment around different things, like, you know, that's where you can dig in a little deeper, see like what's getting traction, like where are users going, where is activity actually happening, and you know what has kind of like a positive outlook for the future regardless of like what the active sentiment is. Those are where the opportunities kind of present themselves. That's where the alpha is a lot of times in this space, where we just tend to swing so heavily between like literally it's so over to it's so back, where like the future of everything is blockchain, like send Bitcoin to 500,000 within the month, like, and then, you know, when we go the exact opposite direction of like, yep, my target, like we got to bounce to 15K before up only again, like that's this space time and time again like presents those things, and that's when, you know, you dig in and take a look at what's actually happening. Like, what are people actually looking at? What are they using? Where's traction growing? And yeah, those are the opportunities.
Danny, is there anything else that we want to talk about on the pod, or are we done?
I think we can cut it there. Any last big takeaways, Mark? I'm curious if you have any clear takeaways. Next 6 months, next 2 years, whatever you want it to be. If you want big picture, small picture, how are you feeling? How should the audience be feeling?
It's funny. I was talking to a fund last week, and they listened to the podcast we did and kind of took it as like a macro signal, the bearish sentiment from the podcast as a macro signal. So I'm hoping this one was a little bit more of a balanced take, in the sense that I hope the viewers can go and look at the fundamental data, look at REV, look at app revenue data, because I think last month app revenue data and REV were the closest they might have ever been. And so, and that's what you want. If you want, more developers to come into the space, you want them to be able to have the incentive to, make a living, earn money, create profits, right? So I think just zoom out a little bit, touch some grass, and, I think there's like low hanging fundamental drivers that have now catalyzed and are just going to be playing in the background for the next couple of years. It's going to take some time, but I think there's only reasons to be optimistic in the longer term.
I love it. Bach, if you have any snide remarks you want to make before the end of the pod, go for it. Otherwise, we'll cut it there.
I don't have any snide remarks, man. I think overall it might be a bit of a tough quarter, but I'm always kind of perpetually optimistic about Bitcoin and crypto. Like, I love crypto, I love Bitcoin, and I think it's like really just hitting its stride. Maybe short-term chop pain, but I don't know. Generally, like, my outlook is good. I think life is good. I think if you're really stressing out, you should have taken some off the table.
Yeah, I think that's definitely good advice. If you're ripping your hair out right now, maybe do a review of the last few months, figure out where you went wrong, take that as some learnings going into the next years of your life, and just reflect on that in general, and go from there. You learn and you live. That's really all there is to it.
The key takeaway: you should have sold.
You should have sold Pico Top, and then you wouldn't be sad. So
yeah, I think. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I think it'll be fine. I think
we'll call it there. I think that was a good chat. Good advice all around. Good takes. For anyone interested, DAS is next month. Remember 0x10. If you're interested, 10% off tickets in the link in the description. Hopefully, some of our guys will see you there. Alrighty. Thanks everyone for tuning in.
Bye-bye.